Dobar dan, dobrodošli na gostujuće predavanje gospodina Richarda Brandta, inače direktora Iacocca Instituta iz SAD-a i bivšeg potpredsednika američke firme AT&T. Današnja predavanja će biti Hunting Investors i Technology Joint Ventures. Mr. Richard, please.
Okay, well, hello, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I know some of you are faculty. Of course, you're not a student, right? Okay, maybe. And some of you have some tests, maybe, and you're studying for your tests. So I appreciate the fact that you're here. When I met your rector, he asked me, and Dr. Saraswati, you asked me to. First, to do a talk on technology joint ventures, but then later we discussed before you left the office, and you asked me to do something on entrepreneurship. So we'll see. How much time do we have here?
As much as we want.
As much until you leave the room, right? Okay.
Till 5 minutes.
Pardon me?
Till 5 minutes we are doing.
Okay, so he said 5 minutes. I have to get my message out pretty quickly here. Okay, so my name is Dick Brandt, and what I wanted to say is before I became a professor at the university and I run this business institute, I was the vice president for international for AT&T, a company you may have heard of. At that time, it was the largest in the United States. So I went on a trip starting in 1980, and we were broken up by the government. So I started setting up operations in a number of countries and doing consulting projects. So I ended up, if you look at this chart, I started off in Dublin, Ireland, then I moved to Rome, Italy, and reorganized a sales force for the Italian government. After 2 years there, well, what happened is during the summer, the first summer, of course you guys know, because you live here in Europe, about Ferragosto, and all the Italians left town, so there was nobody to work with. They're all gone for 4 weeks. So I flew to Australia, ended up selling a big project in Australia, and so then I moved to Melbourne to work with Telstra for 2 years, and then I set up a sales force in Sydney, moved to Sydney, had a home there in Sydney. Then I moved to New Zealand, and we reorganized the whole selling operations in New Zealand. Spent a year there. I met my wife in New Zealand, so that was a good trip. On the other side of the world, as far away as I can go from America, and that's where I met my wife. And then ended up going back to Italy. I had an office in Rome and one in Athens, in Greece. And I bought a company in northern Italia called Iacocca. And after that, I became the vice president of all of the operations for AT&T overseas. But I kind of broke the world up. That's another whole story. Maybe someday in your career, you will come to a point where the job they give you is too big. And that was actually what happened. I said to them, I cannot run the world. I mean, my mother would be very proud if I said I had a business card that said I was king of the world, but I couldn't do it. It was way too big. So we broke the world up into manageable pieces, and I ended up picking Asia because Asia was going crazy with growth as it is today. So I moved to Hong Kong. And after that, I thought I was coming home. Didn't come home, ended up in Amsterdam here, back in Europe, but spent all my time in the Middle East and Africa and Eastern Europe. Did a joint venture in Poland, did one in Moscow, Czech Republic, Ukraine, and then places like South Africa, Ghana, Nigeria. Set an office up in UAE, Saudi Arabia, and a big office in Egypt, and so that was that. Okay, then I came home and was tired, And so anyway, I came to the university at that point, and that's where I became the director of the Iacocca Institute, which I'll tell you a little bit about later. Okay, so I grabbed some information when the good doctor asked me to talk about entrepreneurship for you. And so what's the basis for this talk? I'm going to skip over some slides, but several years ago I became an angel investor, so you probably know the term angel investors. And we are people who, young and old business people that get together and have some disposable income, and we invest our own money in young startup companies. There are 13 investor organizations in the state where I work, Pennsylvania, and we became the 14th. So I have some experience with investing in my own companies that I see rising up, young people like yourselves. But a couple of years into this, I was invited out to San Francisco to do some teaching at San Francisco University. And as a result of that trip, I had the opportunity to go to the Silicon Valley area. We went into San Francisco, and I had a chance to sit in with the very large angel group called the Carrizo Group, which is one of the largest in the world, investing. Still you could still call it an angel investor group, but it's much larger and much tougher to go before. And so I sat in on their investment sessions and had a chance to watch how they invested in companies and somewhat compared that against what we were doing as kind of a young investment group, not young me, but young in the number of years that we were working for investments, okay? And so what I did is I pulled out 5 things that to me were consistent between the two groups, but yet the two groups may have approached the items differently. So see how this will track with you. I'll talk to you about those issues, and then I'd like to finish up with giving you some examples of young business people your age, for the students that are in the room, who have put their businesses together as a result of coming to the program that I run in the States, okay? So the first issue is one that I'm sure you guys are aware of, and that is this whole issue of whether or not it's the jockey or the horse, okay? And maybe you've heard that term before, the jockey or the horse, right? If you're investing in a company, so who's the jockey in a company? Or what's the horse? You've heard that term before. Somebody give me an answer? If it's a new company, who's the jockey? Who is? Come on, guys, I'm sure somebody there. My friend with 28 on his shirt, he might know, right?
Well, the company should be the horse. And the
Yeah, the company or the idea, right?
Company, yeah.
Yeah.
And the jockey should be the people who are running the company.
Running it, the leader, right. Okay, so perfect answer, okay? So if I could give you a prize, I would, but okay. Okay, so of course the issue is that who are you going to invest in? So if I ask the room, who do you wish to invest in? Do you wish to invest in the idea, which is the company idea, or do you want to invest in the person? If you have your guess, which one would you rather invest in? Somebody else in the room, or one of the professors? What do you think?
Idea.
Okay, so
Depends.
pardon me?
Depends.
Yeah, it always depends, right? It depends.
Very important.
Yeah, right. Okay, so here's
The company has the history, maybe.
yeah, or the leader has a history too, right? Yeah. Okay. So in the case of the small investment group that I was part of back in Pennsylvania, we were very interested in the idea, and in fact, you couldn't come before us with just an idea. You had to have a working model. You had to have produced something, and the idea at least had to be sold to one client. So in other words, we didn't just invest in an idea. And secondarily, we were really quite interested in the idea, but yes, we would take a look at obviously who the leader of the organization was that was coming before us, right? Has he done this before? What is his or her history in the marketplace? When I went out to California, and where so many ideas are coming out of Silicon Valley, it was clear to me that the investment groups, and that's why I put that on the slide, they cared whether it was the person who was running it, right? Had the person actually done it before? Was the person in that industry? The ideas were good, that was fine, but unless they could prove that they had really done this before in that industry, the investors weren't interested. There's another difference. The young people that came before us in Pennsylvania, they were struggling like many of you would be if you were starting a company. So some of them were trying to balance their life between running a company and maybe starting a family, or at least paying off their school debt, maybe trying to buy an apartment. At any rate, they were balancing working with also starting a company. A number of them had either homes if they were a young family, and they were struggling with whether or not they could bring this company off the ground, so to speak. I went out to California, completely different. The investors in the Keiretsu group wanted to know that you were in this 100%. So unless you had mortgaged your home, if you had one, and you were investing 120% of your time working on this startup, they weren't interested. Whereas our investors on the East Coast recognized that people were balancing their time, and so we were perfectly happy with that. But the investors in California, they wanted you to be all out, all committed to that company, and if you weren't, that was a mark against them giving you the money, okay? So that's maybe the first major difference, okay? But most of them were interested, of course, in the leader, your first point that you made to me when you answered the question, okay? Okay, the second thing, and I'm going to go through 5 or 6 things. The trap that young investors made in their presentation was usually the market that they presented. So in summary, a number of the young investors that were working in a particular market, whether it was an electronic game or an IT application, or whether it was a product, I've seen nanotechnology products, I've seen software products for the transportation industry, whatever it was. The trap is that a lot of the young investors tried to present a market, the size of the market, which is very large, when the investors don't really care about the large market at all. They know there's a large market out there, but what they're interested in is the specific segment of the market that you think your product is going to be absolutely able to sell. So as an example, out in California, one of the young companies that came before the Keiretsu group was in the copying industry. And it would be very easy for them to put up the copying market, which is tens of billions of dollars of sales in the United States for copying, whether it's big Xerox copiers or Toshiba, whatever. Well, this particular company had a device that was designed to copy books, okay? And their strategy was that all the libraries of the United States at that point were trying to convert their books to digital. And so they were using copy machines that were worth as much as $50,000 just to copy books. But the device that they had created was only $1,000, and it did an exceptional job of copying books. And they also had a software package for the collection of this data. So my point is when they made their presentation, the only thing that they dealt with was how many libraries there are in the United States, how many are there initially on the West Coast, which libraries are actually into a process of copying books, and that was the market that they were going after. And then they equated that number to an economic number. And it was very believable because they knew the specific part of the market that they were going after rather than this big grand number. So that's kind of the second thing that we looked for in the presentation. Do the company people understand the specific part of the market that they're going after? Okay. So number three, what is an elevator pitch? Right? What's the elevator pitch? It's kind of a, I'm sure it's a Western term, but you might have seen it before or heard the name. If you're going to explain your business, go ahead.
Presenting your business idea in a short period of time.
Right. How much time?
60 seconds.
Huh?
1 minute.
Somebody else. How many minutes? Minutes? It's not hours, right?
2 minutes.
Yeah, 2, 3, right. Well, okay, so yeah. So the rector said 2. Why 2? And actually, that's exactly why. I don't know how many of you have seen this movie before, but probably it's an old movie. Most of the young ladies sitting here, you were born after the movie, but it's still a wonderful movie, okay? It's a love story between George Harrison and Melanie Griffith, okay? Anybody ever see this movie, Working Girl? No, okay. So I'm promoting the movie. You should go out and get the DVD, okay? But in the movie, and I'm going to go right exactly to the point the rector made. In the movie, Melanie Griffith works in an investment bank, and she's got a big beehive haircut, and she looks like she doesn't dress appropriately for work, okay? So everybody makes fun of her, the guys that she works for. The issue is she's brighter than all these investment bankers she's working for. But no one will give her a chance, even though she's going to school at night. Anyway, later on in the movie, someone does give her a chance. That happens to be George Harrison, who falls in love with her. And she comes up with a phenomenal investment idea, and she now has a woman boss, and the woman boss is Sigourney Weaver, who I'm sure you know as an actress. Okay, she steals the idea, which is what she didn't expect out of her boss because it was the first time she worked for a woman. But at any rate, in one of the final parts of the movie, the investors that are going to make this investment arrive in this office building. And at that particular moment, they're going to walk upstairs, they're going to go up the elevator, and they're going to sign the contracts. And George Harrison earmarks the chairman of the company that's going to make the investment, and he basically pulls him into the elevator with Melanie Griffith, and they close the doors, right, on the whole crowd of people that are in the lobby. And he turns to her and he says, "You're on, baby. It's your elevator pitch." So she's got 20 floors to get to the top, 2 minutes, to basically convince the chairman that the idea is her idea and why she picked it, not all these people that are talking to him. And of course, you have to see the movie to see how it all comes out and what happens, okay? But your answer was a perfect answer. The rector's timing was perfect. Could you explain your business in 2 minutes? You know? Okay, so he gets a prize too. Could you really explain your business or your idea in 2 minutes, okay? So my point is that you really have to practice. Now these investor groups will give you more time than that. We gave our groups 10 minutes to explain their idea and 20 minutes of questions if they could get through the first 10 minutes. Out in California, they would only give the group 5 minutes. And if they didn't pass the 5 minutes, then they didn't get to the 20 minutes, 25 minutes of questions. And so they were out. In fact, the Carizzo group has a big ship's bell on a desk up in the front of the room. And if you go over 5 minutes, they hit this like the Gong Show. They hit this big gong, and it goes off, and they take you off the stage, okay? So being able to present your story very succinctly is not something easy. You have to practice it. And you have to get your message over very, very quickly. We do this in my program in the States. We present all 50 countries, let's say, that come to the program, they have to present how to do business in their country. And we give them each 4 minutes for each country, and then they have to present a collaboration. If they go over their 4 minutes to present Serbia, let's say, last year we had a young lady from Serbia, a young lawyer from Serbia. If she goes over 4 minutes, an alarm goes off on a clock and we take her off the stage. Okay, it's not very nice, but we're trying to practice with people that you have a set amount of time. Unlike me here, I don't have a set time, yes? So all I wanted to say was that so many of the young investors come with a great idea, but to be honest, they've not practiced being able to give this elevator pitch in the time that they're allotted, and so therefore, and unfortunately what usually happens is the last part of the pitch is sometimes, of course, the most important. It generally may be the financials, and if they don't get to it, then they're taken out. They never had a chance to present the financials. Yes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I will be the member of the board of the university,
Okay.
and you are coming to present
To you.
me,
Right.
will you be satisfied with 4 minutes?
Will I be satisfied? No. No.
So,
No,
I
I'm
have
not.
money, I have power,
Yeah. Right.
I am asking you for 4 minutes.
For 4 minutes. Right. But that's
Can you get all the information in 4 minutes?
That's
Very
the point.
difficult.
No, and he's right. Now, here's the difference. On the East Coast, if you come before our group, I told you we give you much more. We give you 10. But you don't have to pay me to come before our group. You have to appear before some of our board members. We interview you, and if we think you've got an interesting idea, we put you before the investors, right? In the Caritza group in California, you have to pay for this. $1,500, $1,500 if you want to get before this group, right? And I agree with the professor. That's a hell of a short time to try to get your ideas out. But there are 30 people in this group that you would be sitting with, and they're all millionaires, right? And it's their rules, right? And that's the hard part, right? If you don't want to play in their game, you don't have to play in their game. But it's not a lot of time. But again, don't forget, the idea is to interest them in the idea, make sure that they understand that they know this idea, and the market's very clear, and they do have some financials very, very quickly. And then, if you make that 5 minutes, then the room will spend at least 25 minutes, a half hour, okay? But there's another advantage. In this particular investment group, if you pass the first one, there are 2 more Caritza clubs in California. And then you get passed to the second and to the third without paying the fees, okay? And if they're gonna loan you around, okay, so what's the difference? My club would give gifts in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 would be our investment. This club invests $250,000 minimum in a startup company. But if you pass the first one, you go to the second one and the third. That means your potential is $750,000. So you have to play by their rules. I don't like their rules either, okay? I'm just trying to make a comparison of what they were like. Okay, so now we're coming down to the end of their presentation, and I've told you about a few things that are really important, right? Who are they betting in? They're betting in the person, and whether or not you understand the market, and whether or not you can present it quickly. What I tried to put on this one slide are what seemed to me to be the financial issues in the presentation. First, if the young investor is not able to be extremely clear about how they're spending their existing money, and a lot of young investors and young entrepreneurs duck this question, but if they can't be very specific in how they're actually spending the money now, that's a detriment. That's one of the things they're looking for, okay? Number 2, they're all asking for a sum of money. If the way in which they ask for that money is very general, so they want to spend it for sales and marketing, not good enough. If they want a company I invested in is in the transportation industry with a very special GPS that's in the trucks that deals with safety and mileage and the operation of the truck. And they have their own software system. And that company was asking for money, they already had sales, to go into the insurance industry because the insurance industry was quite interested in the safety of vehicles. They had a proven record of increasing the safety by the vehicles that use their system. But they didn't have enough money to hire the 3 or 4 salespeople that they needed to go into the insurance industry. So they were asking for just that money. It was a very clear need. It was one that the investors, ourselves, believed in because we believed that was an important market for them. So if you can't be very, very specific, I saw another one was a nanotechnology device that would be used in factories. It's a nanotechnology measuring device, but it was simply too costly and too expensive, and they wanted the money to do the research to bring the device into a smaller device. So again, if you can't be very specific, they're probably not going to give you the money. So they want to know how you're spending your money very clearly, very quickly, and they want to know how you're going to use the money you're going to give them very specifically. And the last one is an exit strategy. So can someone explain to me what you think an exit strategy is for this company, for this young company? What's an exit strategy? Maybe somebody else who hasn't given me an answer. What do you think an exit strategy might mean? May not translate real well. Anybody have an idea? About the professors, huh? What's an exit strategy? You have a guess? Nobody, huh? Okay. All right. So the exit strategy is very clearly how your company, if you're presenting to me, how your company is going to either, one, how am I going to get my money back? That's the question at the end of the story that I'm going to be asking myself, right? And probably I'm going to get my money back in 2 ways, and that's the exit. You're either going to go public, and therefore the percentage that I own in your company is going to be a percentage of the stock that I'm going to get. Or most probably what's going to happen, which happens to many of these young companies, is what happens to them when they get really successful in a small part of the market. What happens? Somebody comes, the bigger company comes, and he grabs them, right? And so then the company's going to be sold, and the money that company is sold, I get a percentage because of the bonds that I have for what I've invested in that company.
Going to public is timing dependent.
Pardon me?
Going to public companies,
yeah.
Timing depending.
Well, yeah, that's a much bigger timing issue, right? Right. Okay, so going public is a much bigger. So most often, we're interested in what happens if you get acquired.
Acquisition.
Yeah, the acquisition. So the issue for us then is if I'm really trying to convince you to invest your money in me, I also have to have an idea of who would acquire me when. Okay, now we're into the future part of the deal, right? But I can tell you the young company heads that make this presentation and are able to address that issue, they've already begun to think, they may even have contacts, but if they begin to think who is going to acquire them, and they know who it is and why it is, it's a believable story. Okay, and it's the end of the story. And so that's why I put all of this on one chart. That if you're very knowledgeable on how you're spending your funds, and now you can convince me about that. And number 2, I have an idea exactly how you're going to use my funds. And number 3, I have an idea who may buy you someday. I don't know where down there, whether somebody will want to buy PAR as a smaller school for a bigger school, you know. Maybe the rector wants to buy your school, or you never know, right? And have a school in Croatia, in Riga. Okay, so those are the things that are absolutely key. And if you kind of remember those 5 things, then you'll know what I saw most of the investors invest in. So let me just finish here. I'm going to go overhead. Okay. So let me just give you a few examples. of some young investors who have come to my program in the States during the summer, and what they did. One of them is a young Mexican investor. His parents owned a transportation company, a bus company, but he came to my program. His name is Giuliano Lopresti, and it was very clear that at the end of the program he knew that he did not want to be in the bus business, and yet his father expected him to take over the business. Anyway, so when he went back, probably his father was not too happy about him coming to my program, because when he came home he had this very tough conversation with his dad about the fact that the bus transportation business was the most interesting business that he wanted to get into. But his roommate was from Argentina. By the way, his roommate was in the water business, bottled water in Argentina, and his name is Federico Como. The reason he said he was in the water business is because the corruption was so bad in Argentina that the only thing the government couldn't stop him from doing was bottling water, so he got in the water business. But he went to Argentina, and he spent a little bit of time with his roommate there, and they found a leather business that had just closed their factory because the Italians had stopped buying the leather. It was really a very beautiful product, he thought, for the Mexican market, and so they offered this guy a deal he couldn't refuse, and they came back to Mexico City. It was a pure contract basis, and they became very successful in the leather business, the two of them, and they ended up in six shopping centers. But while he was in Argentina, he got struck by kind of the way that Argentinian restaurants were working there, and the whole concept of Argentinian restaurants. And so that led him into establishing his first Argentinian restaurant in Mexico City. Now, I should tell you that he also had time working in the Mexican government, in the Minister of the Interior's office. He was the chief of staff for the minister. And because of that, he had a really good idea which areas of the city, in Mexico City, were eventually going to be built up several years later for government buildings. And so he started acquiring warehouses and buildings in areas that you wouldn't think too much of, waiting for the time when these areas would build up into large government buildings. Yeah.
Is that allowed
in Mexico? Of course. I mean, yeah, is it allowed? Because there was no guarantee.
You're getting information.
Yeah, it's okay. So now we're dealing with inside information, right? Yeah, I don't think anybody would stop him there. But the fact of the matter is, he took the risk because he had to buy these warehouses and buildings in areas that really were not very nice initially, right? And if the government changed their mind, and often that happens when you change leadership in the government, he would have been stuck. But in the end of the story, he's now got 6 very successful restaurants doing 20,000 people a month in Mexico City. But by doing that, he needed wine for the restaurants, and of course Argentina has very nice wine, as does this area. And so he opened up a warehouse and started marketing wine to not only his restaurants, but also the other restaurants in the city. So now he's the largest wine importer in Mexico City, right? So he went from one business to the other, just based on that trip to Argentina. Oh, by the way, he married an Argentinian girl too. And, so he went to Argentina so many times, he fell in love with the Argentinians, okay? I have a young entrepreneur who came to my program. His father ran a tractor building factory in Italy. Renato Bruno is his name. But there were several Middle Eastern interns in my program that were funded by the State Department. When he came back to Italy, he told his father that he really wanted to get into the generator business, and so they started making generators, and he went throughout the Middle East with, because there was an energy problem in Italy, but there was a lack of generator manufacturers in the Middle East, quality generators, and so he traveled the Middle East with his friends that were Arabs and Middle East. They were from Iraq at that time, Algeria, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. And now he has one of the most successful businesses in Italy. He's acquired companies in the UK, but his whole revenue stream started because of the friends that he had in the Middle East. There was another young Italian entrepreneur that was on a team that we had. looking at how to sell Italian products in the West Coast market. He was the leader of that team. He went out to the West Coast, so this was all during the program. And he surveilled the kind of distributors for high-end Italian products in the West Coast market. When he got back to Italy, he got hired by one of those companies, moved his family to San Francisco, and now is one of the larger distributors of Italian products in the West Coast, just based on the project that he did. Another was a young lady, Catherine Searle. She worked for a restaurant, actually a restaurant in a very big hotel in the Quebec area in Montreal. We did a project for a young entrepreneur. You can look him up. His name is Douglas Fu. The name of the company is Sakai Sushi in Singapore. Several years back, he was named the youngest top entrepreneur in Singapore. You probably know Sakai Sushi, you know the restaurants. And he became known as also a couple years later as the most successful entrepreneur that year in Singapore. And Douglas is an executive in my program, so he's come to my program several times. But he particularly watched the way this young lady, Catherine Searle, ran the project team that we did for him. We were looking at the U.S. market for him. At any rate, he hired her, brought her to Singapore. She studied his methodology for a year in Singapore, but she fell in love with a Russian lawyer who was also in my program. So now you're seeing what happens in my program, right? So she fell in love with this Russian lawyer and ended up going to Russia for him to establish his restaurants in the Russian market for him, right? So all these connections. The next guy, Peter Hartsbach, is from Denmark. He has a company for software to measure your eye motion. If you were in a focus group looking at packaging, these software devices look at your eye movement to determine how you react to different colors, different packages, and so on. But his software is quite sophisticated. But in Denmark, he was having a hell of a time trying to keep the software price down through his roommate in our program, who was from Bangalore, India. He went to Bangalore and actually hired a software group in India. Became very successful and actually became good friends with that Mexican that I told you about way back when, Giuliano Lopresti. So he went to Mexico, spent several months with Giuliano, and Giuliano found 3 major clients for him for his software, one of them being Coca-Cola in Mexico City, right? So it's all networking. Last but not least is an interesting one. These 4 guys were in my program about 4 years ago. Now, they did not know each other, and they could not be from more different businesses. The Singaporean Chinese guy is an investment banker, okay, young investment banker. The Chilean's parents are in the wine business, so they have a winery. The Israeli is into software for mobile devices, so for your telephones. And the Australian, in fact, he just emailed me this morning at 8 o'clock. He didn't realize I was in Serbia. He runs a travel business for trips to Thailand, to Burma, to Malaysia. So he's actually in the tourism business. So investment banking, wine, mobile applications, and the travel business. No agreement at all. But the only agreement was these 4 people really got on well with each other, and they liked the way each other thought, and they felt that each of them could be trusted. So they agreed after the program to form up a small company. They did it in Singapore because the investment banker said, and probably the rector, if he was here, he would agree, it's much easier to establish a company in Singapore. So they established a company in Singapore. And so what they did is they shared their ideas in these 3 industries, and they all collaborated. They would meet monthly by Skype or weekly by Skype, and then every couple of months they'd meet personally. And they shared their ideas, and they tried to help each of them get into a market based on the skill that they had. And they agreed that the first one that worked, then they would share the revenue. What actually worked was the software developed by the Israeli found a place in the Chilean market, brought in by the guy who had a lot of great connections in Santiago, because he was in the wine industry, but he had a lot of good connections there and led them to the wireless market, and that became the first sale for this group. And then they split the revenue from that sale to invest in each other's business. Okay? Really very creative way to work in the marketplace. Okay? And none of them are in the same business. So I guess at the end of the story, it's all about networking. It's all about the people you know. And it's all about using those resources because you trust those people and that you believe that they can be successful in the marketplace. Okay? All right. So that's that talk on investors. All right. So how are you all doing? I know it's very warm in here. Do you want me to keep going? Okay. So this slide just graphically shows you the flags of all the countries I've worked in. So I think it's a much prettier slide than the other one, right? Okay. So this is where we were in the beginning here when we started talking about coming over here, and Dr. Sakasugi, you and I talked about joint ventures. Okay, so I will probably shorten this up or ask you which countries you want me to talk about, but this is a talk about doing joint ventures. Okay, so I don't know if we have a. There probably isn't a pen here, huh? Or a magic marker? No? Can you get one?
Yeah.
Like for a whiteboard?
Yeah, for the whiteboard. Oh, there we are. So these are okay, right? Yeah, okay. Okay, so as I went around the world for those 15 years, so you have to understand, when I went overseas in 1980, we were in no country at all. We had connections all over the world, but we were nowhere. When I came back home, we were in 71 countries. Okay, so I was responsible for about half of that. And I would go into countries, and I would set up a representative office, right? Okay. How big do you think a representative office is? It's my first office in the country. Big, small, medium? What do you think? Small. Why is it small? Yeah, well, I don't have any money yet. I don't know whether there's any business. And the company's not going to spend extra money letting my office be large. So we could always be small, 1 or 2 people, the secretary, maybe 1 salesperson. And then in the early days, we did some consulting projects because that's something we could do based on our expertise. Finally, we'd hire some salespeople, a few. They would always be local people. Then we'd bring in people that we call market development people. These are former investment bankers looking for partners. And down the chain here somewhere, we would do, hopefully, a joint venture with a local partner. And that's what this talk is about. How important do you think that is? You know, I've got a list of things: rep's office, consulting, hiring salespeople, all that. How important do you think a joint venture is in the country? Important? Medium?
What do you consider a joint venture?
Pardon me?
What do you consider?
Okay, so a great question. What do I consider a joint venture? So I'm going to show you what that is in a second, okay? So probably unless I show you that, it probably doesn't help, right? Okay. Well, even though it's farther down the list, in my mind, it's one of the most important things I can do. But her question is absolutely great, and that is, what am I talking about? Okay. So you're a great straight person because it's my next slide, right? Okay, so sitting at the table with a foreign partner, these would be the things that would be on the table, that what we would be talking about. Generally, it's going to be a cooperative business activity, hopefully between 2 companies. Okay? Sometimes it's more than that. In China, I had 3 partners across the table. In Russia, I had 2, MGTS, Rostelecom, right? And so in the joint venture in Thailand, as an example, I had 1 partner. So I'm never really quite sure how it's going to go. I really only wanted 1 partner in China, but the Chinese government, for very specific reasons, wanted me to have 3 partners. I'll show you that in a second. So I have to figure out how many partners am I going to have. But it's going to be a cooperation between the 2 of us. What is going to get developed here is an independent company. So it's not going to be the other company, and it's not going to be my company. It's going to be a newly named company that's going to be independent, okay, in the same area. Each of the people at that table are trying to preserve their identity, and we're going to have to allocate ownership, what percent you're going to own. If you go into China, if you went into China several years back, let's say before 2001, how much do you think you could own of a company? If you set up a joint venture in China, what percentage do you think? 49%. Great answer, because they wouldn't allow you any more than that. So if you were in China, you'd be 49% would be, let's say, for me it's the USA, 51% is Chinese, right? Why would they legislate that? Or why would they tell you that's the way it is?
Because they need the technology.
Right, they're into technology, and by controlling 51%, what do they do?
They steal the technology.
Yeah, that's right. It's theirs, right? They control the venture, right?
Yeah.
So that was the deal. If you want to go into China, you have to understand that they're going to control the venture. Now, by the way, that changed. That changed in 2001 because they joined an organization called the WTO. What is that?
World
Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization has regulations that you cannot mandate what part of the venture you own, how much you own of it, right? So now they still will push to be majority owner, but they cannot force you into it, right? So that made a big change for those of us that started to go into China. Okay. So you're going to have to argue out what part you're going to give to the partner, what part you're going to have. Now there's another thing, and these are all negotiation points. I'm just trying to give you some flavor for what it would be like if you're at the table. Operational roles. So I'm going to put five jobs on the board here. One's going to be the chairman of the joint venture. One's going to be the managing director, okay, who runs the actual venture. Another one's going to be the CFO, Chief Financial Officer. Another one's going to be the VP of Sales. And another one's going to be the VP of Production, who runs, who's on the factory floor. Now these are all technology ventures, okay? So we're going to be porting some kind of technology there. In the case of the first venture in China, they were cellular towers that we were bringing over. The later venture was fiber optics. In Thailand, it was connectors for intelligent buildings. Okay, we're going to bring some kind of technology. And so there's 5 jobs on the table. Chairman, Managing Director, CFO, VP Sales, VP Production. So if I'm coming to Serbia here to do a joint venture with you, AT&T, Serbia together, we're going to build a factory together. And I ask you, because you're the Serbian side, what job do you want there? There's some you should have, there's some you shouldn't have, okay? So which job do you want? If I'm giving you the chance to negotiate out of the box for the first job, which one do you want? Chairman? I know you want all of them, but you can't have all of them, okay? Not a good, I know. Okay, Managing Director, Chairman, CFO, which one do you want? Which one do you think you should have? Someone take a guess. Anybody, go ahead.
Vice President of Sales.
Okay.
Because you're familiar with the market.
Perfect. Okay. So this goes to Serbia. Okay. Now, yeah, this was always a problem for me because if you saw my background, I've been a salesman my whole life. Okay. So I think I know how to sell. I have sales training, but the fact of the matter is, he's right, I'm wrong. I would love the sales job, but I don't deserve it, right? You know how to sell in your country. This is your market. So I'm going to give him that job. Now switch to my side. If the Serbian negotiators negotiate the Vice President of Sales, what job am I going to go for, you think? You're on the American side now. It doesn't have to be one of the top jobs either yet, but which one do you think I want? He's right. Okay, so the director said CFO. And actually that's exactly the job I would go for. I'm not prepared yet to argue about the chairman or the managing director. Why do I want the CFO job?
Control the sales.
Huh?
Control the money.
Control the money, and probably most of the funds are going to be mine, at least the majority, right? I will try to get as much money from you as I can, but if you don't have much money, I'll have to bring more of it, okay? In fact, in China, by the way, I had to bring all of it, okay? That was just the way it went down, okay? I can tell you later what happened, what they did bring, but in the beginning I thought I was going to get, because when I did a joint venture in the Middle East guys in Abu Dhabi, they said, how much money you want to bring on the table? No question. But in China, they said, we don't have any money. No, well, any money, right? If you've seen the latest newspaper reports, in China, they have 3.8 trillion, right? Trillion in reserves. 70% of that is in US dollars, by the way, so that makes them our newest best friend, right? So we try to stay close to them. So 3.1, but when I was there, they said they had no money at all. So, so yeah, I'm bringing the money, so I want to at least control the books, okay? So now you guys have got the sales, I've got the CFO. So it comes back to your side of the table. So we're in negotiations. Which one do you want? Which one should you have? What's the next job you're going after? You think? Somebody else in the room. One of the ladies. Okay, ladies, come on. Why don't you guess at a job, right? Over in the corner there. I'm sure one of you must know, right? Can I get you to give me an answer? No? Okay, can't get it. Somebody else in the room?
General manager.
Okay, he says general manager. What do you say?
Well, if we are splitting the positions one by one side by one
Yeah.
side, the next option for Serbia, it should be the VP of production.
Right.
After that, the USA people can take the director.
Okay.
Second position.
So he said the managing director, and he said the production. In that kind of a discussion, I'm gonna let him. Okay. I want to come back to your point. Okay.
Yeah. So the first thing, Serbia decides who should take the production. After that, USA should take the position of director, and chairman should be the third person.
And who should have the chairman?
Third side.
Who should be the chairman? American or Serbian?
Third side.
Somebody abroad.
Huh?
Somebody abroad.
Well, it could be somebody abroad, but it's certainly got to be somebody like you were, because you were close to the government, right? I don't deserve the chairman's job, whether they're abroad or whether they've been a former minister or whatever. The chairman's job is focused upward, right? It's almost like a lobbyist. Right, and so it's not deserving for me to have that job, right? So I will give that job, the Serbians, okay. Now, here's the problem. This is why, because you're right, the foreign team will come at me for that production because they want to learn it as much as possible. But whose technology is it in the joint venture? Which one? Who's got the technology? Why am I being asked to come there?
Foreign companies.
Yeah, the foreign company generally. So it's my technology. Therefore, it's absolutely critical for me that the person that is my person, whether they're American or Dutch, in fact in my Chinese venture he was Dutch, okay? But he's the closest person to the technology. And therefore, I will argue to the death that this job is run by the American. Even though my partners, like you, are arguing because they want to learn as much as they can. I might make the assistant to the VP Serbian, but I will not ever want to give that job up right away. Now, by doing that, what probably happens is I've also got to succeed the general manager's job to the Serbians, okay? So now I've got both the chairman and the managing director. I will make the assistant managing director an American, but and so that's probably the way a lot of it will end up. You guys should be the chairman. I had to succeed giving you to that job because I wanted to control this. So from my standpoint, with only 2 jobs in the venture, controlling the money and controlling the factory floor, I've got my hands into probably 2 of the most important areas, right? But this is a negotiation. I mean, we just did it in 10 minutes. This could take a month or 2 at the table with the foreign partner, okay? But just to give you a flavor for how we're doing this, and of course down at the end of the story we're going to have to decide what the risks are. Okay, so when the young lady here asking the question about, what is a joint venture, why do you do it? So when I put up on the board 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reasons why I would give you why we do a joint venture. Why do we come into your area, find a partner, put money on the table, bring our technology, okay? They're not all as important. Well, all of them are important, or I wouldn't have put them on the chart. But you tell me what you think are the most important reasons why foreign partners come to a country and then actually bring their technology and establish a factory, establish technology venture in your country. Why? Which of those are the most important in your mind? They're all important, okay, but some are more important to me than others. So pick one. What do you think is the most, one of the most? There's several actually. There's 2 or 3 on there that are always consistent for me. Somebody pick one. Go ahead.
Cost savings.
Huh?
Cost savings.
Okay, so obviously if you're going to bring half the money, or at least half the resources, right, then I'm going to save money, right? I don't have to do this by myself, right? Now, by the way, sometimes some governments will give you the ability to come into their market and set up a venture at totally your cost with just advisors from the government. I had that situation in Taiwan. And we took it because it was kind of the deal that was on the table, right? But generally, I'm going to save money here. Okay, now, save money how? It's much cheaper for me to come into your country and rent an office and hire, local Serbs to be my salespeople, train you in the technology, give you some cars, which I've done in many, many places, okay? Believe me, that's a lot cheaper than me investing $30 or $50 million from my side to create a factory, right? So I'd much rather, in some ways, start off small like that, right? But in the end of the story, I know that the long term is going to be better for me with a joint venture. Okay, so yes, I am going to save money, but I'm going to spend more money up front. Okay, so I'm going to save it in the end, but I'm going to spend more money up front. What's another one up there? Another one. Somebody else. Just pick one. You think? Go ahead. One there.
Access to the superior technology.
Pardon me?
Access to the superior technology.
Yes. Okay. So this is generally not my reason. Okay, it's generally your reason, right? We said from the beginning, right? That is what drags me into many countries that maybe I wasn't ready to go into, but the country was ready for the technology. The director worked in Singapore. Singapore's a hotbed of technology, right? So you know what they do to invite people with key technology into that country. So my as you say, the ace of spades in the poker game is the technology that I would bring because of Bell Laboratories. So yes, that would be a key issue, but it wouldn't be my issue. For me, it's about protecting that technology, right? Which in some countries, going into Thailand was not an issue at all. Going into China in the early days was a hell of an issue. In fact, it's, to me, still the fundamental issue that the Chinese have to get over, because no one trusts that they will protect the technology that you give them, right? But in any way, access to technology is one of the top ones on the list, and it's usually your issue, not mine, okay? What's another one up there? Yeah.
What does it mean that risk reduction?
Okay, well, risk reduction, of course.
Because in risk reduction, you can put market access, whatever you know.
Okay. So yeah, let's go to that point. The professor just mentioned market access, okay, and risk reduction. So the amount of time it will take me to get into your market, even if I hire local salespeople and port my technology over here, is going to be a long period of years for me, right? So the only way that I can really get away from the risk of being here for several years and never really knowing whether or not I've actually got a business will be successful is to have you guys as my partner because of the other issue he mentioned, and that is that you're not going to be my partner unless I believe that you have significant market access here, right? So you're probably already in the domain that I'm in. You certainly have the government influences that I believe you should have. I will be checking on that. And if all of that works, the main reason I'm coming here is for this, right? You want my technology, I want your market. It's a good marriage. And that's why we're here, okay? And if it all works well, then I reduce my risk because then I know I'm going to get into the market in a faster way, all right? So what about this one here? Where is this an important issue today in the world? Access to your labor force might be an important issue here too, right? I don't know what your average hour rate is here. But where has 50% of the world's manufacturing moved in the last 10, 15 years?
China.
To China, right? For me, that's a very scary thing because to have one country controlling the majority of manufacturing in the world. But I do another talk called Globalization Going Backwards, because what's happening right now? Who's chasing China around the world with much lower labor rates? Just stay in Asia. India. India's got another problem, though. India is not a manufacturing mentality. They're call centers, technology, right? But if they ever get nobody's investing much in India these days in manufacturing. They don't trust them yet. They don't trust some of the laws. But they certainly have lower labor rates, and they certainly have English-speaking people, and they certainly have a high work ethic, okay? So yeah, India is the loom, and you guys all know that in the next 10, 15 years, who's going to be bigger, India or China? India, based on the birth rate, okay? So people are absolutely in China have to worry about India. But what about a couple other Asian countries right now that people are moving production out of China and they're moving them to Asia, another Asian country?
Philippines.
Huh? Philippines. Philippines, I had a major office in the Makati district of Philippines. I was just there 2 years ago. Highly educated people, English speaking, highly motivated, a labor rate 1/3. 1/3. Probably you know that all the Japanese shipbuilding operations have basically moved to the Philippines, okay? So people are going to the Philippines. They're chasing the business out of China. There's another one that actually my country was at war with. Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the highest rated new tigers in Asia, right? Then you can add Indonesia, 5th largest country in the world, and you can start to make a list, right? The fact of the matter, why are they all going there? Access to labor at a lower rate. If you look at the Chinese labor rate, the last 2 years, the China labor rate has gone up 34%. So a third, 34% rise in their labor rate. While they quoted right now to be an average of about $3.50 per hour in most of China, if you're talking about the high-tech factories on the shore, on the starboard coast, out at Pudong, outside of Shanghai, you're talking about labor rates 2 and 3 times that amount. So if you're starting to approach $9, $10 an hour for labor, you're starting to price yourself out of the China market by the time you add transportation costs and logistics costs. Maybe you saw the announcement about 5 months ago. General Electric, one of the largest manufacturers in the United States, announced that all their appliance manufacturing are going to be brought back from China and from Mexico to the United States. That they're done with some of the technology issues in both those countries, but particularly the logistics issues coming out of China. And so they're going to move it all back to the U.S.
It's one more. Research and developing laboratories
Right.
is in the United States and production is in China.
Is somewhere, yeah.
So they have to have...
Eventually they have to come together. Okay, so the professor, yeah.
One of the reasons why they're moving is to be close to...
Is to be close to the two of them. And he's also hit on one of the key areas in the negotiations of our joint ventures. We almost never put the R&D facility in the foreign partner's lap, unless they demand it. Now, by the way, in some countries they demand it. We would rather have the R&D, as you say, back at the headquarters of our research, Belden Laboratories. But if the partner makes it an issue, then we have to move something. Bydgoszcz, Poland, some of you might know that area. We bought a company there in Bydgoszcz. And we moved manufacturing there, but the Polish government wouldn't let us deal with it there unless we started to bring some R&D. Right now it's one of our bigger R&D centers in Europe. So, but he's absolutely correct. GE is going to move the production together with the research and development. Well, anyway, those are some of the issues. How much? We have another, what, 15 minutes? Okay. So what I can do here, let me just show you, you know, some of the country stuff. And we'll take another 5 or 10 minutes here. You tell me what you want to talk about, because it would take much longer for me to explain all of these. These two joint ventures, Russia and Singapore, were in countries where, in effect, I was working in a cartel. Okay, we can talk about what a cartel is. These 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So China, Korea, India, Italy, and Indonesia were all joint ventures that I pushed into the country because they had mega markets that we were trying to get access to. So I went into those. These 1, 2, 3, these 3 joint ventures, these were very specific joint ventures. They were not normally the kind of venture I would do. One was in Thailand, that was because of my contacts there. The other was in Japan because we had no business in Japan. And the other one was in the UAE for obvious reasons because of all their wealth. And that was actually a military project, okay? So, these two ventures, Russia and Singapore, they were initiated actually by the government. So, as the case is, in these two, the government said, I want you to come in. In the case of these 5, I wanted to come in, so I pushed into the government in order to try to get into those countries, okay? So, is there any of these you want to particularly talk about? Do you just want me to say a few words about each, or what do you think? Does it matter? Huh?
A few words.
A few words about each, okay. All right, so these two. Well, these two are, I call them into markets that are cartels, right? Okay, what's a cartel? Somebody explain to me what you think a cartel is. You studied cartels? Have you looked at it before? I should ask whether they're legal or not. You're my friend who's telling me what's legal, right, Professor? Is a cartel legal?
If you mean drugs,
If I mean drugs, no, right? Okay. Huh? Or if it's involved in the mafia, that was my other issue in Russia and the Ukraine, okay, yeah.
Cartels should be constrained and limited because they can manage
the market.
Yeah,
okay, so a cartel is a restricted market, and the rector hit it right on the head. Why would a government actually, in the case of these two, it was a government kind of legislated cartel, okay? They allowed it to happen, they actually made it happen. And why did they make it happen? Because they were trying to constrain the market. Why would a government want to constrain the market to just a few suppliers? Why would a cartel be good? Or could it be good? I mean, they're in charge of the market, so this is not illegal in their countries. Why would they do it? You think? Pardon me?
To protect the market.
To protect the market. So they don't want all kinds of suppliers dancing around their market. They wanted a few that they could control, right? That meant that you had to have a, go ahead. The quality of the product. So they could demand certain levels of features on the products. They could demand certain research that had to be done in their country because they're giving you access to their market, right?
To control the prices.
And in the end of the story, to control the pricing. Because if they control the pricing, then they're not worried about wide fluctuations in pricing. Now, the problem for me is that as an American businessman, the lawyers are saying to me, I cannot go into a meeting with my competitors. My competitors, by the way, were the Germans, Siemens, and the French, Alcatel, in both of these markets, right? You can imagine my surprise when I did the first cartel in Taiwan, and 4 or 5 years later, I'm sitting in Europe, and it's the same guys. You know, it's Fritz and Pierre, right? Siemens and Alcatel, and I'm talking to the same guys again, right? But they're trying to control that market, but my lawyers are saying you cannot go in the room and talk about pricing, right? Even though the government is doing this to constrain pricing, I can't partake in that conversation. So, by the way, I did not, okay? We actually control the market through geography, okay? So that's the end of the story. We basically, across both of those countries, we looked at the map, we kind of agreed with the competitors that we would stay out of their way in certain places, like in Warsaw, I bid, or in Taipei, I bid. But in some of the other cities, Krakow and Poland, I didn't bid. I let the French or the Germans basically try to bid for that, right? So in effect, it wasn't a perfect solution, but I couldn't talk with pricing, so we basically controlled the market through geography. But they were cartels, and they were tremendous business, because once you're in, everybody else is out, right? So it's a great business to be in, right? Why would I want to get into, so this was, okay, I hadn't planned to go to Russia. I was already in Poland. We were talking to the Czech Republics. We had just done a small venture in Kiev, in the Ukraine, and I was staying away from Russia because of the mafia and because in the 90s it was not an easy place to go into, okay? Why do you think the Russians, this is after 1991, why would the Russians try to draw me into their market? Because of the technology we have. What's going on between our two countries in 91? Who are the leaders then? Reagan and Gorbachev, right? And the two of them are somewhat together. They were peacemakers. And one of the ways that the Russians thought that we could make peace together is if they understood the Western mentality and they understood the way we thought, which meant that they wanted to operate joint businesses with us. To be honest with you, all I wanted to do was sell, okay? Sell equipment. The Russians made it very clear, you're not selling anything in my country until you come in and do some investment and we actually operate a venture together, and we get to know each other, and we work together in the same company, then maybe we'll buy something from you later.
Professor George, he spent 10 years in Russia.
In Russia.
Joint venture. But he said now...
Yeah, he looks very familiar to me.
Yeah.
It seems like I've seen him somewhere. Have I seen you in a bar in Russia or something? Huh?
He was in a lot of...
Were you in Moscow or?
Moscow and Tajikistan.
Okay, all right. Well, then he knows what I'm talking about. And so we had to get into business. This venture was called Telmos with MPTS. Okay. Singapore was a little different thing. This was with their National Computer Board, and this is where the leaders of Singapore wanted our technology and operation control systems because the Singaporeans were very good in hardware technology, but at that point in time they were not good in software control technology. Since we had the biggest systems in the world for switching, they wanted access. So what they said, but they didn't just want us to get access, they demanded that we actually set up a school in Singapore, which we did for, it was called, I can't believe the name of it now that I think about it, the name of it was ISIS, right? Not a good name for a school these days, but anyway, the school was called ISIS, okay? And it was a great business. I was on the board of directors there, but several years after I left Asia to go to Europe, the venture fell apart, not because of me, but because we were completely disjointed in the end objective of the venture. We thought we were building a school to train people to build software that we could eventually sell in Asia. The Singaporeans wanted a technology school that we could train people. They didn't care whether we sold anything at all. They just wanted a high-tech training institute. And our people wanted something that would come out at the end that we could actually sell. And that clash eventually broke the whole venture up, unfortunately. Okay. Well, these, I think these will all have an individual story. I mean, obviously I wanted to get into the largest market in the world, which was China. This is a whole big story about what happened there. The truth of the matter is I was in China when Tiananmen Square happened. So at that particular time in June of 1989, we thought that the whole country was going to come apart. We thought the country was going to civil war. By the way, it wasn't just my company that left. We were in Beijing in the China World Hotel. Everybody left China. Audi went out of there, GE went out of there, Alcatel was there, Ericsson was there. Everybody left the country because they thought China was going to war. Well, it was obviously very important that we come back to China, and I ended up actually in a meeting with Jiang Zemin. Now I have a picture of that. Jiang Zemin is the president. He wouldn't normally talk to me, but I was the head of Asia, and he, as the president, could really put the hammer down on me about how important it was for me to come back, my company as the big telecom company, to come back into China after all these young people were killed in Tiananmen Square. He also told me that I was in the wrong place. Beijing was not the place that he wanted me to be, and that he wanted me to be in Shanghai. And so I eventually, if the president of the country tells you that, I'm not stupid, okay? So I eventually moved the whole operation to Shanghai, where he had prepared everything with the mayor of Shanghai. So eventually it became a very successful joint venture. Korea was another story because I set up an office in Seoul. We had our own salespeople for years, but as you probably know what I'm going to say here, unless you're in business with one of the chaebols, the big guys, who's the leader today in smartphones around the world, in just telephone technology? Samsung. Who's the leader out of Korea in all kinds of TV and digital technology? LG, stands for Lucky Gold Star. Who's number 5 in the world now in manufacturing of cars? Hyundai. Well, it's also Kia because they're both owned by the same people, right? I mean, who would have thought 10 years ago that Korea would have the 5th position in the world, soon to be number 4, okay? So I had to do a joint venture with LG because if I wasn't in with the big guys, I would never go there. It's another long story. Eventually it came to a crashing end because they stole our technology, they put it in their own product. We got fined for our technology going into embargoed countries, and we didn't really trust, we never did trust the Koreans again. In India, I wanted to get into India because it's the 2nd largest market, soon to be one of the largest, if not the largest market in the world. But at the time I was going into India, every product that I shipped over the border into India would have a minimum of 200% duty on the product. Couldn't sell in the Indian market. Even my components were taxed, not as much as a completed product, but still 100% duty on components. So I had to get into a joint venture, and if you know anything about the Tata Corporation, Ratan Tata is a very honest guy. It was a very community-oriented company. It's one of the top 4 or 5, I'm sure, in the country.
Very rich.
Huh?
Very rich.
Very rich, very wealthy. They're the ones that first, they're the ones with the $2,500 car, the Nano, I think it's called, the Nano, yeah. I actually rode it, I was in Bombay last year, and I rode in one of those cars. It's absolutely amazing for $2,500. You might not put it on the road here in Serbia, but, you know, that's the price of a motorcycle, right? So, and then in Italy, I had to buy a company because I couldn't get into the Italian market. The Italian politicians were pretty clear about that. I ended up buying a company called Italtel. And then in Indonesia, the only reason I put it up there is that in those days, Mr. Suharto was in control of the country, which he was for some 30 years. And if he wanted to do a joint venture in Indonesia, Mr. Suharto said I had to do the joint venture with his son. The son's name was Tommy Suharto. So Tommy got on our board of directors. Not that I really wanted him on my board of directors.
So you didn't have a dilemma?
I didn't have a dilemma at all. Well, no. I didn't have much of a dilemma, but they're not the most honest guys in the world, okay? But I didn't have much of a dilemma as long as I put the son of the president on the board of directors of my company. This is the kind of crazy stuff you do, right? Okay, and I'll finish there.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Just curious, which part of AT&T business was pushed into Asia? Is it different? Because AT&T is well known for telephony, but with Bell Lab stuff, I mean, there's a broad range of products that they had. So I'm just curious, was it telephony and networking that was pushed in Asia, or something else?
Yeah, okay, so it's a good question. So when the government broke up the company, the first major breakup was to separate all the operating divisions away from what was the core of AT&T. The core of AT&T was the biggest telephony company worldwide, so we had more satellites, more fiber optics, and more connections around the world. What the government didn't want us to do was to operate all 20 of the telephone companies, 26 of them, in the United States. So that was the first breakup, okay? And that occurred in 2004. And so the government gave us 4 years to go overseas to try to make relationships with all those countries where we had basically connections. Now, the group that went overseas first was the equipment side, which was called Russian Electric. That eventually gets broken up. So the first one was 1984. It was in 1996. In 1996, they created what you guys know as Lucent. And eventually it was purchased by the French, called Alcatel. And maybe you know what happened last month because it was purchased by Nokia. So now it's Nokia, Lucent, Alcatel, although it eventually will be Nokia. So at that point, that was the major division of the company. The AT&T side was the telephony side, the satellite side, the cost of all the telephone traffic between your country. And we set up AT&T offices. I was on the equipment side, right? Everything that runs a telephone network, from switching to fiber optics to cellular towers to all that technology, is what was controlled by Bell Laboratories. That stayed on the equipment side. And so we went around the world, basically, with those two parts of the company separate, because the government mandated it, right? So that was the tough part for us, because we used to put both together.
AT&T had monopoly for a
We had
while.
monopoly, and actually was a great way to sell in countries where we had one side that did the network between the communications, and we did all the equipment, right? You could see how you could put those two together to make a deal, but the government broke it up again. Yeah. So it was really three breaks. First the companies, then the bigger company broke in half. Yeah. And I don't remember what we were doing here, but probably it was the telephony side, not the equipment side, because I don't ever remember what could have happened after I was gone. You know, but it was probably the telephony side, because then we did major agreements with telecom companies about the communication networks for you people to get out of your countries, and for the large satellites and all that kind of stuff. So. All right.
So at the end, how much did AT&T profit from all these joint ventures? Because
Well,
now they're new companies, right?
yeah, now it's almost as big as it was when because it's the second biggest wireless company in the United States. So it's almost as large as it was when we were together, right? But it doesn't have the equipment. By the way, the reason that Nokia bought it for $17 billion last month was because the old AT&T Lucent has the largest market share in the largest market of the world, the U.S. dollar value. And so what Nokia bought was the market share in the United States. Right? That's why they did it. Right? And they paid $17 billion for it. Right? Okay, so just to finish, sometimes you do ventures that have nothing to do with the stuff that I've talked with you about. As an example, in Thailand, it was simple business in connectors and distribution boxes, but this was a business, by the way, my agent in Thailand, that's another whole story. His name is Thaksin Shinawatra. Shinawatra might be a name that some of you know. If you look at what's going on in Thailand, Shinawatra was the guy that I was with. Thaksin Shinawatra became the president of the country. His sister was the president of the country last year, and she was taken out by the military, okay? Some people think he's still running the country. He now lives in Dubai. But he was one of the most powerful guys in the country, became the president. He was my agent, right? And this was part of the business that he said that we should be in. We actually did a joint venture factory with him, and the son of his best friend became the head of our factory. In Japan, they were interested in intelligent buildings. They were not interested in all the big stuff we were selling. Why? Because NEC is one of their most important companies. They were in our business also. They didn't want us competing with NEC. NEC didn't do intelligent buildings, and so we went into that business. In the UAE, it wasn't even an equipment business. The sheikhs there, Sheikh Mohammed, Sheikh Khalifa. Sheikh Khalifa was the guy who was closest to the military. I had several meetings with him. They wanted because of the American forces that are there, and they wanted to set up a secure fiber optic network throughout all of the 7 Emirates. And they felt that the best company to do it with was not the Germans or the Swiss, or the Ericsson Swedes or the French. They wanted to do it with an American group. And so we ended up putting in a $500 million fiber optic network for the UAE. But The deal was also, in order to make it a joint venture, they did not want us to do any of the construction work, even though we make a lot of money on that by doing the digging and the construction and the building of the towers and all of that. They wanted to give that business to a company called Etisalat, which I'm sure you know if you've traveled in the Middle East. It's one of the largest telecom companies there. So the deal was, yes, you could come into our country, but you have to do that. So every one of these has a story. Okay, that's the end of the story. Let me just finish. I'm just going to use a couple slides here. Okay, so this is my university back home. It was established in 1865, and as you can see, we have about 5,000 undergraduates, 2,000 graduate students, and I'm part of the staff there of 1,100 people. You can see our operating revenue is quite significant. Probably what's really important is this number right here. I'm sure the rector would appreciate that. So not a very big school, 7,000 people, but we have $1 billion endowment. So that $1 billion are all gifts that were given back by our graduates. One of them being,
we don't have so much.
Yeah, yes. So most schools overseas don't have those guys. I'm sure you guys are willing to write a check here once you graduate, right? In the United States, that's part of the mentality, and my benefactor is Lee Iacocca, who has written 2 checks. One of, well, he ran a campaign to build my institute. We ran a campaign to buy the mountaintop on the campus. It cost $47 million, and then he gave a $10 million gift to create my institute. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes. We have that gift, $10 million. We have the Global Village program, which is the program that Gordana has been a teacher in my program. She's also sent us some students here from Croatia. We've had people from Serbia come to the program. We also have a program called the PA School for Global Entrepreneurship. That's a program for 16-year-olds, high school students, okay? And we have the Global Village on the Move. These are programs we run overseas for people that are in business overseas. So we just came back from Russia, and prior to that we were in China. Prior to that we were in places like Peru, Malaysia, and Australia. We're on our way in October. Next month I'm on my way to India. And in 2016 we'll be in Luxembourg, running short programs for business people. And then we have an internship program that I started back in 1999, where Mr. Iacocca gave me another $5 million gift, and our university raised $5 million. And so we're sending people all over the world from our school, juniors and seniors, to work overseas. You see, the issue was that hundreds of our students go overseas to study abroad, but they don't go overseas to work. And we had a vision that what really would change them is if we took you individually from your school, let's say here in Serbia, and I gave you a job in, let's say, Istanbul. So I did that with a guy that was a supply chain and logistics senior at my university, and I sent him to work for IKEA for 3 months in Istanbul, and completely changed his life, okay? And so what we were trying to do was change the lives of young students by sending them to foreign countries to work. We started with about 4, then we went to 7, 14. 2 years ago we sent 35. Last summer ago we did 64. And just a few weeks ago we had 82 students returning from all over the world who were working overseas for the whole summer. But the program I wanted just to spend a couple minutes and then I'll finish because you've been with me a long time. That's Mr. Iacocca, who was the former head of Ford and the former head of Chrysler. Okay? So the program that I run in the United States is called the Global Village. It's a leadership program, and it's also an industry knowledge and business knowledge program for international business. It also helps you establish a global network, and might help you change some of your career goals. What makes it so different is that in the 5 weeks that people are studying with us, they not only take courses, yes there's courses, but you don't have to go to any one of the courses if you don't want to. We give you a full selection of courses. If you don't want to go to a course, then you actually go to a company visit. So managing the courses, we have 2 companies that you can go visit. Visiting executives, we bring in about 70 executives from all over the world, and you see them 5 at a time in the front of the room, and they tell you what their business is and what made them successful, and then on the spot you pick who you want to go away with, who you want to see. So you don't have to see any of them if you don't want, and you get to pick, and then you do that again, so twice a day you do that. Everybody presents their country, so we had 45 countries there last year. So we had 45 countries presenting how to do business in their countries. We had 25 of these visits. You also do a community service project. We work for handicapped kids. And you also do consulting projects. So before the 100 people arrive, we negotiate 15 consulting projects with companies. Last year, 9 of them were overseas companies out of the United States. And we do a consulting project in 5 weeks. Usually it's a market entry project, helping companies get into new markets. So that's also something here for the faculty members that are here. If there are companies in this region you think we could help, we would propose that we talk with you about that. None of this work costs the company anything, and we help these companies. They have to be a working company. And Gordana, you helped us with 3 Croatian companies this year we actually did work on, right? So, what? 2 Croatian and 1 was Srđan's company. So 2 Croatian, 1 Serbian company we worked for this summer. So we think it's important that the students have the experience of working on projects. We do a lot of social events also, but a couple other things with it. So this was the program in 2014. We had 89 from 42. Last summer we had 92 from 45 countries. You can see the breakdown. You can see what areas they come from. It's usually half men, half women. A third of these people have their own companies, and so they're already out of school. A third of them have graduate degrees. We had 8 lawyers last year in the program. We even had a couple doctors. They were going to set up their own clinic. The youngest last year was 19. The oldest was 41. Prior year, the oldest was 51, believe it or not. She came out of Italy. So, yeah, so we have over 100 and some businesses that are involved in the program when you're there. And what I wanted to show you was, yeah, this. So we've now got 1,970 people that have come to the program, and they've come from 134 countries, including your country. And maybe I'll just finish with that. You can see those are all the countries that have actually been to the program. So what I'd love you to consider someday is maybe considering maybe to come to the program during the summer. We can help. After we have some people coming to the program, we also invite professors to come teach in the program. So we do that with all our partners. We'll bring the professors to the program and put them up at the university. Some people have actually started first with young professors. Mostly they've started with graduate students that have come to the program for 5 weeks. And I also have some scholarship money that I can help with in order for people to come, okay? Especially for new schools, all right? So it'd be an exciting opportunity for some of you. We'd love to have some of you consider it at some time. Gordana here at her school is kind of our representative and agent in this region. So if any of you are interested in this, and so Doctor and Rector, if you want to have some further conversations, we can talk about it at lunch, but certainly Gordana is the one. She's been with us now, what, 5-6 years, I think, huh? Right. 5 years that we've been doing this together. So we've had many people come from Croatia, okay? All right? Understand it? You guys, you've done a great job sitting here having to listen to me, right? My wife would never sit here this long, I guarantee you, okay? So thank you very much.